The likeness and
image?
the likeness is, yeah, so the image about who they are is their spiritual being, and they're spiritual, and we're spiritual beings in God's image. The likeness is that we have all trifold beings. They don't have that.
And the likeness is
they have a spirit and they have flesh. We have spirit, body. We have spirit, soul, and flesh. They don't have a soul like us. They can't go through a fall and a redemption like us.
But they have a will, and their will is part of their soul. How does that
Well,
work?
this is what's weird. This is what's weird. The will is part of their spirit, and that's the reason why their spirit, which has flesh, is different from our flesh. Remember, they have a flesh that's different than ours. They don't have relations. Yeah, it's weird. It's just weird. I don't understand it, but I know it's different. So that's to your great point. Our soul has a will. Their spirit has a will. It's like, what the heck is that? It's just really weird. So anyway, so in verse 3 is where it gets interesting, where he says, I'll put this down on my phone. So he says, and man lived 130 years and begat son his likeness and image and called his name Seth. So he says man lived 130 years and then begat likeness and image. And he said, and he called him Seth. So the only question you have to, so if you read it for what it says, there's like zero contradiction, like at all. The problem you have is the way it's worded in English makes you go, what the heck, man? And I get that all day long. But if you read it the way God wrote it, God said generations of man. And he already told you he created and made man. So why is that a big shocker? He's going to tell you that there's two different kinds of man. So why would he not bring out both of them? Because he just told you the word man applies to either one. I didn't tell you which one yet. So he goes on and says, okay, and the day I created man, then he goes, thank you for catching me, and I missed this myself, and likeness made man. He just mentioned both of them in the very first line. He just told you straight up. And then he goes in verse 2, he mentions the one. He male and female created, blessed, and called man. But then he goes back into, I could easily, someone could say to me, oh, it's a fluid thought you're reading into it. Why isn't that he states both of them here, but he talks about this one here, then he talks about this one here. Why can't that be the case? There's no generations for the created, that's why he doesn't mention them. There's no generations. That's why he just mentions them in a general sense. Then he mentions them here, then he goes right back to verse 3 again. That's the only way you explain that, unless it's totally wrong and created man is the same thing. So you only have two explanations. It's the same thing, or there's your rational explanation as to why it's worded the way it's worded. And the reason why it sounds confusing is because of the word man being misunderstood as ha-adam, Adam, or mankind. It just says man.
Well, what about the word for him then in verse 1? The day that God created man, he made him the likeness of God.
Okay. God, likeness, that's the made man.
So that
Is that what you're asking?
About the first man.
In the day God created man, and in likeness of God made him. So he's talking about both. God did both things. He created a man, and he also in the likeness made a man. He did both. What's interesting is he didn't.
It's just like, I don't know.
What he left off was he didn't say he created man in his image.
But when you talk about him, it's like going back to the first part. In the day that God created man, him is describing man. I don't know what the word him would be. In the day that God created angels, okay, he made angels in the likeness of God. Why would he say he made?
Man
Because
likeness, not angels.
No, but Todd's saying that the word him, the way it's worded, would look like it would go back to the created man.
Thank you. Please understand where I'm with this.
Yeah, you're saying the pronoun
Thank you.
goes with the noun of the sentence, the created man. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Click on that.
And so what I would, to your point, I acknowledge that, and I would say that the problem with that is, what's the real noun that's in question? Is it the statement of fact that he said generations of man? Or is it the next noun where he specified created man? Which one is he referencing? Do you see what I'm saying? Is the pronoun is verse 1 an expounding on the noun from the generations of man? The word man is the noun he's referencing as the pronoun him? Because he said he created man, and then likeness of man made he him. So he's talking about the other man that he made. Is that what he's saying? Do you see what I'm saying? If there was no, in the day God, and if there was no thing where he says, this is the book, generations of man.
Right.
If that statement wasn't there, you have a strong argument for, dude, the pronoun is obviously, the only noun in this whole entire context is created man, if that first verse isn't there. But since that first verse is there, you have to go, the first sentence, excuse me, yeah. This is the book of the generations of man. Is that the noun? Do you see what I'm saying? You with me? Yes.
I'm wondering about Abel. Yeah, Adam is the federal head and all the ones that sin after. I mean, that's why the second Adam avails for us. Did Abel sin? He was conceived before sin. I know he got the blood from Eve after she sinned, but he was conceived before they sinned. So what happens to, did Abel sin himself?
I personally don't believe so.
So what's going to happen to Abel?
Well, he's the one I teach about that, and the one in Mark, there's a young man dressed in a long robe, a stole down to his feet. That's the only reason that you can possibly justify to me, why is there a young man at a resurrection tomb? It has to be him. He was the type of Christ. There's no other reason why there'd be a young man who even qualifies to be there to testify the resurrected Lord. The only one that makes sense is the one that was the precursor of him to come. He was the firstborn of a woman to represent. That's why Satan came against him through Cain to kill him, because he didn't know he'd be the promised seed or not. He wanted to take him out. So he took him out. So he was an antitype, or the type, I should say, the antitype of Christ, who was to come later.
So he's in heaven. He died that he didn't sin. So where exactly will he be in the scheme of things? Will he be can he be part of the bride of Christ? What's he
Sure.
going to be?
Yes, sure. I have no problem. Yeah, so this goes back. Lenny asks this question all the time about people that are before. Yeah, people that are before.
All men have sinned.
Yeah.
All men have sinned.
All of sin comes short of the glory of God. Yeah. So why hasn't Abel sinned, you're saying, right? Is that what you're asking me? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That's a different
Well, I
question.
know, I'm just following
Is that what you were saying? Because that's a different statement.
No, I know, they probably are two different.
Is that what you're talking? Is that what you're talking about? What he just said?
Well,
He said the Romans passage that all men have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Well, that's what he's talking about.
when I made the statement, I didn't think Abel had sinned.
Right. So are you saying what Todd was saying though? Todd was just pointing out that all men have sinned. It says in the Bible.
Yeah,
But I believe
it's
like
from the genealogy of Adam, and Abel's not in the genealogy of Adam.
correct. I know.
That
I know.
all sin to me applies to the genealogy of Adam.
I'm talking. Yeah, for me, when he says all have sinned, I'm taking that myself.
There's no offspring.
Not so much the genealogy as much as it is from the fact that when sin was in the conception process, ever since then it's been passed on. So therefore all have sinned.
And
So
then,
you
of course,
can't. But Abel wasn't a part of that.
Yeah,
He was conceived with no sin.
yeah. And
So
Cain
he's
died.
exempt from that statement.
And you said
To your
Adam was
question,
not
to your
Cain's
statement.
father. Was it Satan was Cain's?
Father, yes.
So neither Abel nor Cain can be part of the line coming down from Adam.
Correct.
Now, what of Cain's offspring? I mean,
They-
since Adam is not his father, Adam's not the father of Cain's offspring. What happens to his offspring in terms of redemption? I mean, well, you know what I mean.
Well, they're the ones who go to Jehoshaphat, potentially. It's going to be, see, here's the thing. Cain himself, though, is a person who had he's going to sound weird when I say this, but Cain had a covenant from God. You're probably going to think I'm sacrilegious for saying that.
Mark,
But
on-
he had a mark on him. He was given, the mark wasn't on him per se. It meant to be as a symbol out ahead, which was land of Nod. That the mark was, I give you a land and no one's going to find it. It's kind of like he's like a movie. He's like no one knows where he's at, so no one could find him. So he was living in peace. God made sure no one stumbled across him. It's kind of cool. It's a big world, by the way, back then, and it just was beginning to get populated. It's very easy to hide a human, you know what I'm saying, on a big old earth. So he put him into a place where no one find him. And then on top of that, he says, if anybody does touch him, I'm going to take vengeance sevenfold. So that sounds like a promise to me that God made to him, and it doesn't sound like he had to do anything, because he didn't. So God made an unconditional covenant with him, no different than he did with Abram. It's an unconditional covenant. Two different things, but how are you going to tell me that wasn't an unconditional promise he made? Sure it was. He just said, I put a mark on you, or a symbol out ahead, that's what it means. And I'm also going to make sure if anybody touches you, I take vengeance personally. Wow, that seems pretty strong, you know? So he has a covenant himself. He didn't say with his people, though. He said with him. So his people represent the rest of us in our sin nature. He himself is a person that is of a covenant person who represents, like you keep bringing up, like the George Soros kind of person, the breathless of covenant, who does the bare minimum. Because remember what he says in Genesis chapter 3, or 4 or 3? 4. When he goes to Genesis, well, it's in here, sorry. It sounds crude me doing it like this, but in Genesis 4, it's in verse 7, when he said, if you did well, in other words, you just did what was right, would you not be accepted? And if thou did not well, the sin lies at your door. So he's telling him, if you just did what was well, God would not have told him to do that which is well unless you had the ability to do so. You're not accountable for what you don't have. So that's why God said, I reap what I have not sown. In other words, you had the resource to produce more. The reason he's reaping what he hasn't sown is because you gave you the resource to do more. That's why you're accountable. He was accountable for what he did know. He had the ability to do better. He didn't choose to do it. I contend his ability to do better was he was supposed to go to his brother, submit himself to the fact that he was the headship of the shepherding of the family, being the one who raised flocks, and say, hey, I know we need a lamb. I want to vicariously do that through you, or have one myself to sacrifice to the Lord. He didn't do that. It's because he had self-arrogance, I would think, pride, which I think shows up later when he premeditates in the Septuagint and says, let's go into the field when he kills Abel, his son, his brother. He does that. So that's what I think his issue was when he didn't do well enough. Because he did bring forth fruit, the best he had. It says he brought forth the fruit of the land. So it says it right here in Cain in verse 3, brought of the fruit of the soil and offering unto the Lord. So it wasn't like it didn't say he brought soiled fruits or bad fruit. He brought his offering as if it's inferred that it was not like it was like half-heartedly. It wasn't good enough because he brought fruit and not a sacrifice of an animal. Wait, no, it's okay. That's fine. That's okay. That's okay. Does that answer your question? I answered your, okay.
I missed communion, but I've got to get going.
Oh, I forgot about it. Shall we go do communion?
You know what, this, go ahead.
Do you think that the young boy that you think is sad is next year?
You mean Abel?
Do you think that he's the same age that Jesus was when
I seen you
Pam
guys.
and Todd and Greg and Sandy.
Well, when he was, well, the way it words in the way that he gave his sacrifice here, I don't think he's 12. I think he was more 30, because
seeing you again.
yeah, I think he's 30 because that was the beginning of his ministry. Jesus was, and the
Right.
priesthood side of things, you didn't do things on your own until you were 30. So, yeah, and the fact that Abel gave a sacrifice on his own, you don't do it as a kid. That means you have to be at least 30, because for 20, 25, you're watching Dad. 25 to 30, you're doing it with him watching you. But this seemed to be on his own because of the fact that Lord said to Cain, why didn't you do it? So their daddy wasn't encouraging them. They were on their own, knowing what they already knew to do the right thing. So I think it was independent, and Cain did his thing and Abel did his thing, which I think speaks to their independence as being 30 years of age. Like they're both 30, and that's what represents, the beginning of the ministry. So there may have been, if you want to have an exact type of Jesus, that means there could have been, was he 30 or 33? If he was 30, then I'm saying 3 years had to pass before Cain killed him to be the type of Christ, right? Or he was actually 33, and then he did the sacrifice and Cain killed him. But I think either way I think it's more 33 myself. He was north of 30. But that's still a young man to them, because that's what an Anir is not until you reach later on. So if that makes
I
sense.
was just gonna make a comment that really also helps solidify it for me, talking about changing from Satan.
Uh-huh.
In Genesis 4, right above Genesis 5, verse 25.
Yeah.
Just verse, 25 and 26.
Mhm.
And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and named him Seth. And then it quotes, for God has appointed another seed for me instead of Abel, whom Cain killed.
Yeah. He doesn't even acknowledge Cain as his seed.
Correct.
Another slam dunk, right? If I could just make a slam dunk of the created man now, right? The created man's harder.
Genesis 4, verse 25.
That's Genesis 4, verse 25. So the created man's harder to see, right? I don't have a slam dunk for you. God makes that one kind of slippery. Sorry. But to your point, hopefully back on that created man thing in chapter 5, I can agree with you that if that pronoun would be there, but I hope that you can see the fact that I always have to ask the question, if I know that would make an easier deduction for me, why did he put the first statement before it? As if to make it so that he didn't make it as clearly to debunk it, he made it unclear to debunk it. So why would he do that, you know what I mean? So it kind of makes me think that, again, I think in verse 5, verse 1, just to answer the question from before, that I think the hymn refers to the hymn in regards to the generations of man. And he's describing the generations of man. And one, he says, in the days he created man, and in likeness of God made he him. And the him is the pronoun for the first statement of man, not for the previous created man. That's what I'm saying. If that makes sense. So we're off a little track, but is that okay? He's like, yeah, okay, whatever.
You just got
Keep
Whatever.
going, look how long it took this.
I know. What's that?
We still didn't finish
Get
the
the
angels.
Okay.
Being stressed for-
Gosh, all right. Fell with Satan. Okay. All right, what did I say here now? All right.
No. Go back there.
So this was the restored earth. And this was okay, so
It's all Lane's fault.
gosh. So all right. So this is so these guys here, so they're chained. So they're chained. And they're in the black. I think it's blackness and darkness, I believe it is. Wow, that was a big yawn. So I believe that's what blackness and darkness is what it says. And then we have the chains. Let me see, is that right? Did I get that right? Did I get it right? Come on. Chains, yes. Thick darkness and Tatar. Yes. So thick darkness. I should put thick darkness.
I'm gonna stand up for a while.
And then on Jude, so here you go in Jude, and that's the thick perpetual chains and thick darkness. I want to say it right. Come on. Okay. But it wasn't a mark on his head, just so you know. Here. So,
Cain was from Satan, but.
so if he said, so if you, he put a mark upon him, and that's the same word that, it's a word for sign. He gave a sign upon him. And it's the same sign. He calls, for example, the Sabbath a sign he gave unto the Israelites. So if the word sign means a mark on somebody, like a tattoo or something, so what do you do with the Sabbath? Where's that tattooed on the Jew? Where do they, is there a bigger nose? I mean, what is that? So people always, I used to think they can't have a bigger schnoz, they have a tree on his head, because all the movies say that, It's not true. The sign was, look, there's Nod. No one's going to find where you're at. That's the sign I gave you. If I didn't care about you, I wouldn't have put you in a place where no one's going to find you. But if in some happen chance way, they think that they can actually kill you, they're going to come across me. So if you come across them, they're going to think they can kill you if they found out about you, which means word was getting around about him that he was the first murderer. Imagine that. The story's getting around.
Also Satan, so to speak, right?
He was the type of the Antichrist to come.
Yeah,
He's
so
the type of the sin man in all of us.
So why
It's not
would
good.
God be marking him?
Well, he gave him a sign. He gave him a sign, not marking him. He gave him a sign. The word mark means sign. So he gave him a sign out ahead, which was the land of Nod. So why would God do that? To show us that even when we get to our darkest time of sinfulness and separation from him, which is what Cain did, he makes provision. But that makes no sense. And he doesn't have to your exact point. There's no reason to do it. And it doesn't make sense why he did it. But God goes, cool, right? Because if I didn't do that, then I had no reason to reference why I did that for you, for me. It's the same thing with us. He had no reason to do it, and there's no explanation as to why it would even make sense to do it.
It's interesting that Cain would think that people would want to kill him because he's first person who ever killed anyone. Yet you think because he killed somebody,
They'd be
now
afraid.
everyone else wants to be like him.
Yeah, yeah.
It's interesting logic.
Yeah, it is. It just goes to show you how sin, infects. They want to emulate it. Kids want to emulate other sinners, not. You know what I'm saying? He did it, Dad. Right? You heard that, yeah. So anyway, so it goes. Oh, my little pages are falling out. So that's Genesis. So that's there. So then 3. So then we're talking about. Oh, whoops! I should have put also. What's that verse in Genesis 6? I only got to go to this piece of paper. It's so silly. It's goofy. All right. 1, 2. 1 and 2. And then what's the other verse? I want to show the giants in the land. And verse 4. I should just put through verse 4. I'll put it that way. All right. So then you have, not Genesis. It's going to be Deuteronomy. Hold on a second. Here we go. And then we have Deuteronomy. Oh, Numbers. How you want? You got Numbers 13, 22, 28, 33, Deuteronomy 128, 2, 10, 11, 21, 9, 2. That's your. It's going to take a while to write these all down, so sorry. That's a lot of references. Goodness. Joshua 11, 21, 22, 14, 12, and 15, 15, 13, 14, and then 21, 11. And then Judges 1, 20. Goodness gracious. And then I'm going to have, this is the, oh, man. Oh my gosh. I have to put all this on the board just so you can see. You asked for this, so that's why I'm doing this. I happen to have this readily handy, so. So this is going to be all the verses that show the giants, which proves that if they were existing after the flood, then the only way they could get here is from the people that are angels that fell as a third group. So, and I'm going to keep on. Goodness gracious, here's another. So the imams. Oh my gosh, my feet. And then lastly, the Nephilim. Okay. All right. So this right here, just so these, I'm just giving you scripture references of these giants' names, and as you can see, Nephilim was occurring in Genesis 6:4, but later on is mentioned again. How? If the angels were already third fell and they were already dealt with and chained, how'd they come back? That makes no sense, unless there was another group, and there was, and then they're mentioned here. Well, how can that happen if, in fact, they were dealt with here? These are also giants, and so on, and so on, and so on. So this group here is so you got 1 group, 2 group, 3 groups. So this group is the ones that put on these are the ones that actually were responsible for the hybrid offspring, the giants. That's these guys. Okay? So this first group went with Satan, or no, excuse me, they went with cherub. The second group, this is right here, see, they went with him here. The second group went with Satan. The third group just started to make offspring giants. If you want to remember them that way, that's probably easier too. So the first group is the one cherub is covereth association. The second group is a Satan association. The third group is a hybrid offspring association. The second group did that too, by the way, but it's 100% these guys, if that makes sense. And by the way, I always make the comment that since Satan is the author of sin, where do you think they got this from to have relations with humans? On their own accord, or they're from Satan? You know, they got it from him. Oh, so he must have did it first. Right. Well, and since they did it in Genesis 6:4, if he did it before, that wasn't much time. When did he do it then? Oh, that's right, that Eve thing and the Eden, you know. And there's another evidence of that too. So going back to here, I'll make sure this is. I'll put this so Todd can. So this is the noun for. This is the noun here for the pronoun. Him, which is down here. So he knows. So if you take a picture, your phone is there. I'm sorry. You good? It's 5:30. You know that, right? Okay, close to it. Wow, I know I gotta get involved in this.
I group them all together. I had the timing wrong.
It is a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It's a serious rabbit hole.
I actually thought there was just that 1/3 and you were divided up and that's what they did.
No.
I didn't think there was 1/3
No.
and 1/3 in another group.
I didn't either.
No,
I think it was all.
you can't even read that word. Gosh, I can't.
I mean, they were refilling the earth. There had to be very, very large numbers, right?
Oh, sorry.
So it makes sense that there's more than just the couple groups we were thinking.
I just didn't think about it. Maybe it cost me more. I was just satisfied to know that the angels that caused that problem didn't think about groups.
So there you go.
Well, Preston, what was like the land mass?
That goes back to the studies we did on 2 Peter. The first Earth was not the same as it is now. It was not a globe like we see now. Remember? It was more like a big circle, and he had like a dome on it. But then everything changed.
The flat earth. It was the flat earth. Oh my
Kind-
gosh, there's people out
kind-
there who believe it.
Well, that's kind of the reality. But the reality is they teach that that's existing today, and that's way wrong.
Right.
That's just totally doofus. There's no way. So, but the reason I'm saying that is there's a lot of evidence. He talked about the earth not moving, and he said it to be still, and all this. So we talked about that before, and he called it the world of his earth, and he put a circle upon the earth, and all these different phrases he uses. They use these phrases to refer to today. To me, they're no different than a millennial person or a covenant person who takes truth in Scripture and misapplies it. And for me, I'm not really, and I don't want to talk about that stuff that's not rightly applied. It makes no sense. There's no different than those men who want to say, oh, look, see, women, obey your husband, obey your wife, obey your husbands. Really? So the part about submitting to each other out of fear of Christ, you ignore that part? It's right before that. Why do you want to ignore the verse right before it? It's just really, I still have, and then there's guys that call in the radio shows and say stuff like that to people on Christian radio shows. I'm like, really, dude? You're so stupid. So they'll people who make comments to me that are out of context, they take a truth, or it says women shut up in church and don't talk. They say you couldn't talk, right? Really? That's not what he's talking about. You darn well know it. He's not talking about that. He doesn't mean you can't talk at all. He just means you should not, be asserting yourself above a man in a way that acts like when a man is teaching that you can, do one better than him. Don't do the whole arrogant thing, because the women back then, could have an easier tendency to do that because, again, God blesses women to see things more than he does men at times. So it's harder for a woman. She has to do the normal thing of filtering what God gives her, but then she has to also filter, oh great, I got to do the human thing and filter it through this whole governmental man over women thing garbage. So he's just saying, remember, when a man speaks, he has to worry about speaking on behalf of God. When you speak, you have to speak on behalf of God and under the government of what God gives you, which is because of the consequence of sin, you go through the man, how you speak that truth. So you have to do it respectfully when there's a man present type of thing. That's all he's talking about. He doesn't mean you can't talk. He just means don't do it disrespectfully. That's all he's talking about. That's it. That's it. That's all he's saying. Just like the man, he's just saying, but that the woman like hate when I say that, but it's the same way as a man in a marriage has a heavy responsibility if things go south. I'm more to blame than Babes is. If something goes wrong, it's more on me, which is like, we both share a different burden, so don't get like it's like I get a free ticket out or something like that. We both got issues to deal with. That's different roles, you know. So people who say that, but the flat earth, are going back to that, they just take truth and they misapply it because they think they get involved, they see fanciful stuff that just is so cool that they just want to force it into something that could draw attention for the sensationalism, is my opinion. And sell books and raise money and get TV shows and YouTubes and all that. And there's guys behind it, by the way, that have a lot of evil, malicious intentions, by the way. Some guys you talk to locally are decent folk, but some other folks who are behind the core of who's pushing the agenda, oh my gosh, man, those people are weirdos when it comes to like they're wackadoodle spiritually, seriously. They embrace a lot of wackadoodle spiritual stuff. I know this from firsthand, taking over 100 hours studying this stuff from them. Out of respect for a friend of mine, I promised I would do that so I can honestly comment on it from not a judgmental standpoint, but from I spent 100 hours, I studied it, I get it. It has some truth in it, but it's misapplied 100% wrong. I don't agree with their theory. It's 100% false. It's just false. So anyway. No, what it was, yeah, it's not now.
It doesn't say as wide as the earth is now, and then once it became
Yeah.
atmosphere.
Yeah, so basically, you think it's pretty cool. Watch this. So God makes it like this, right? And there's like this dome on it, right? So then God said the heavens opened up, and the flood waters and the deep waters came up. Waters came from here, right? They came down because the heavens opened up. And then right here, waters came up too, right? So when that happened, and then the whole earth was flooded. Then it says that God raised the mountains and he sunk the valleys. So then he made it kind of like that. He rose the mountains and sunk the valleys. So it's not a round globe, it's more like an egg, on its side. Remember? Oh, and by the way, when the earth got all darkness and black, by the way, remember I told you the blackness is the hover over the face of the waters, the spirit hover over the face of the waters. And I told you the light goes down, the darkness is down here, remember? But what you don't probably realize is that, do you know that if you pull this up yourself on oceanography, you can have a little fun little YouTubing on this thing. It's pretty cool. Down in the darkness of the ocean, we can't even go, where that 20,000 Leagues, Jules Verne's novel's made up of. Guess who dwells down there? Yeah, whales can go down there. Normal fish can't go down there, just saying. But whales can be like, I got this. Just coincidentally, those are the only animal that God created in the Genesis account, to Greg's point earlier. So interesting how they dwell on a place that represents the reminder of what once was. Where does the rainbow dwell again when the rains come? In the heavens. And where did the floodwaters come from again? Oh, that's right, the heavens. What a coincidence. What a coincidence. The whale in the dark represents God's symbol of the first flood. That he put something there to remind you of the first flood. That he would not do it that way again. And he didn't do it that way again. He did it differently. He did it differently. He flooded it twice, but in a different way. It wasn't mankind. It was different peoples. And the earth was different.
So there was no day and night on the first?
Nope. Isn't that cool as all get out, or what?
So it was always...
So when God made the heavens and earth, there was no darkness.
So
So that means there's no space of night. There's none of that stuff. It was all light. Just imagine light, like I mentioned earlier, just shining out. It's just unbelievable. God's the light. So God is just, it just emanates. Everything's just illuminated. You couldn't see stars. They existed. You just couldn't see them.
See 'em.
How could you see them? The light's so doggone bright. How you going to see that?
How long was it like that?
I wish I knew the answer to that question. I've always myself wondered that. I don't know. That's like the same answer to the question. I call that eternity past. So eternity present is the same thing. I don't know, because in the Greek it's so unfair. Once you see the fact that the ages of ages just means as far as it means as far as I know in perpetuity. That's the best way to say that in English, right? So there's no such thing as forever, never, never, never. In the Hebrew he says the word eternity, but in the Greek he makes it so like he's ages of ages, which is basically as far as I can see, as far as I can tell. So I wonder, since God says where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more, there's going to be a time and place where people do come out of this fiery pit of the smoke rising, I would think, or else that statement can't be true. He says where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. So are you going to eventually take people out of a lake of fire who took the mark of the beast and worshipped him? Are you going to let Satan go? Are you? I just ask those questions to myself, and I wonder, and if he does, I say, let's say you do, you can't be doing that right away. Let's say it's 1 billion years in the future. What makes the timeline? When is that? And forget that. Forget all that. They don't want to go on that train of thought. Forget all that. Well, if God says he's the Alpha and the Omega, which is the Greek alphabet inside time, he says he's also the beginning and the end, which is the beginning of before time, and he's the end after. He's after time. He's continuing to go. We exist in time. So for him to be the end, it's just like he was the beginning. He existed outside of time, which is outside of creation. He exists. So he has to exist over here too the same way, I would think. Or else why say you're the end? Why not just say I'm the beginning? Why have to say the end? As if to infer there's going to be a time that time will be no more. And it's just going to be you again. And if that's the case, when will that be? And I won't care because I won't know. And I can't complain because I'll be content as I'll get out having the time I did have, I would imagine. So things like that cross my mind. So I don't know the answer to the question. I'm just giving you thoughts that around that same thing that I wonder. I don't know. I wonder myself. I personally have this thought that, remember when people, I don't know if you heard me say this before, but when he talked about how you're going to be in a diapanon, you get part of the bridegroom, and then the city comes off the earth and goes out, right? So when that's all we know, then that's it. Then it's kind of like this. Then it's like there's nothing else said, right? So then what do we do? I think it's kind of funny that the Star Trek thing says we'll go where no man's gone before. This is going to sound weird, but I personally believe like there's this, like, say the universe could be measured, but even though we know we can't, but like God's going to take his throne room, and with all these people, and they're going to like a UFO kind of thing. It's going to just go around. It's going to go outside of whatever we think is known, and he's going to think, you think that's it? What are we doing? So he's going to take you around for how long that takes, and then he's going to go outside and just show you places that you would never think were even possible. And I think one of the things he's going to show, for example, I think he's going to show, this is my opinion, he's going to show multiple life forms of people that didn't ever sin. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying he's going to show multiple life forms of people that didn't even sin, just to kind of show his handiwork. Because think about it. The reason I think this, by the way, is because why did he make so many variations of animals and plants and trees and insects and even of humans were different variations of ethnicities and cultures? It's like he has fun with diversity, with expression of uniqueness. So you're going to tell me he only made one freaking planet with life on it and that's it? I find it hard to believe. So I just think that he has other planets with life on it. They just don't have any problems with sin and degradation and corruption. And he just kind of shows, look, these are pink ants that talk and walk with each other. You're like, why pink ants? It's cool, right? Weird, but okay. And look, they hang out with bees that are giant.
It's Starship Troopers.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying. No, I'm just saying that maybe. Here's some other human type folks look like you, but they're not. You know, they're all the same height. They're all 4 foot. See, short people are cool, and they're like, really? Yeah, they build tall buildings. I'm like, well, how could they do that if they're short? It's not, how do you? I don't know. I'm just saying. Well, I just think it's kind of he might show a planet of all this different colored people and different, whatevers, and I just think it's going to be things like that he's going to show just to say, you see how you could have turned out if there wasn't sin. This is what happens when you let my hand continue on. Watch when I was doing my thing, this is what I would have done with you, but I wanted to show you that you needed this way. I chose this way for them. When you think, oh, I'm a sadistic God, I needed to have sin. He's like, no, not really, just with you guys. I did ordain all this, but I also ordained these things too. Look, see, pretty cool, huh? And you're like, okay, in contrast, we're just a little bitty thing on your whole canvas of coolness. I get it. You have a whole museum of artwork. It's like he's the artist with the Museum of Artwork. He's going to take us around his art museum tour and go, look, here, I call this one Matako. Matako, what's that? That's a planet of people that I did this with. They live in trees. What? I don't know. I'm just saying. I don't know. I'm just saying. I don't know. I don't know what to say, but I hope you know what I'm saying. I think that God's going to show us things that may be a planet of all animals, and they all just talk with each other. Like, whoa, what? I mean, I just couldn't. I don't put it past them, is what I'm saying.
So all things are possible.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of an interesting thing that I think, why would it not be something that glorifies God? And that glorifies God and makes him into more of the appreciative, for us to have an appreciation and gratitude for the Creator and have a more of a mind-blowing experience. That's what an artist does, right? An artist puts out artwork for you to get the wow factor. They don't put the same thing out for you. If they want you to get wowed by wow. You're going to be a director of an art museum soon, right? You don't want to show, look, he made the same fish again with the starfish. Can you please, put a dolphin in there or something? Give me something. Give me something different. You can't put it. This starfish this time he's smiling. Dude, would you stop? There's more sea life in a starfish. So I think God's going to be more creative than that. He has to be. He's the artist of everything. So that's why I think that. So that's why I don't know how far back it went. Maybe far back there's also similar things like that we don't know. I don't know. It blows my mind. I'm getting off track. I babble. I don't know, but I just think it's fascinating to think about. So everybody fall asleep? We got to do communion, by the way. Todd's like, let's do this. Let's take a break, clean up, and then do communion. What do you think?
Sounds good.
I just pray to close our study time because I'm getting tired too. All right. So Father, thank you for this time we've had, an opportunity we have this to gather with you. Thank you for all your insight and time and knowledge with us and just your love and embrace to us. And thank you for all you do in supplying safe travels back for everybody who's traveled here. We thank you for the fellowship and for your love. In Jesus, Yeshua's name, amen. Okay. And for the plumbing getting fixed.
So will we ever get finished studying?
No. Sorry. You all right? You back okay?
Great.
You back okay?